Welcome to the Backfire Coliseum. These are today's gladiators. 9 very premium, high quality, first focal plane scopes for hunting about in the 3 to 18 zoom range. Now, if you're saving up to buy an optic in this kind of category, you want it to be bomb-proof. You want to be able to go out in rain, sleet, and weather and have no worries about water. You want it to be drop-proof, tough, and you want it to track perfectly, so we have some lab equipment to make sure they're tracking absolutely how they want. We're gonna test sharpness, low light performance, everything in this. But first, who wants a scope that can't stand a little rain? Let's find out with the old pool test. They all advertise that they're waterproof, and so they better be waterproof. This test is brutal. It's way more than you're ever going to see on a hunt, but with so many scopes to choose from in this range, you might as well pick one that's going to be absolutely bomb-proof. I don't know that I would say I would never pick those because I really like especially that Burris Veracity PH, but again, we're doing this to find the very best. We're going to do 3 different tests on these scopes using some lab-grade materials to get a very precise reading on how well the scopes can track. So when I dial to 1 MOA, 2 mils, whatever each scope is, that we're getting an absolutely precise reading every single time. Because otherwise, obviously, you know, you're shooting at 500 yards, you dial to over many mils, and you may actually be shooting a little high or low if it's not tracking perfectly. So first, we'll do the box test. I'll show you how this happens. So come look over here. When I put the scope in the device, you'll see there's just a green light shining through, and then there's a reticle in the device. That's an extremely, extremely precise reticle. And then on this one, we're just gonna do a box test. So we're gonna go up, right, down, left, and make sure we're returning exactly to the center. We've run this test, and everything past that. Now what that means is the gearing in the turret can do the same thing every time. What it doesn't mean is that when I dial to 2 mils, it's truly moving me 2 mils. And that is where we had 2 scopes fail out. So that is the Vector Optics Continental. These ones were the only scopes that we were able to observe an error in. The error wasn't giant, but it was meaningful. And the same thing on the Vector Optics, it also went a little bit too far. So both the Vector Optics and the Hawk did display some tracking error in this test. So what does that mean? That means if you're shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor out to 650 yards, you'd see an error of about 5.5 inches. So it's meaningful, but it's, you know, it's gonna be fine if you're shooting shorter distances. So we have 2 scopes now beat out, and we've got to fight the rest of the gladiators. I think it's time for a good old-fashioned drop test. Oh boy, I hate this part of the test. It's time for the drop test. We're gonna drop it on the top turret and on the front objective bell for each scope. It's not completely equal because some of the scopes weigh more than others, but we gotta put everything through the gauntlet here to see what we get. So it's gotta be knocked out of this test for that issue, but I'm anxious to see what Right-On has coming up. This test is called the deer distance. This is for you guys who are hunting out of tree stands and stuff. You don't want to be too magnified that you can't see the deer if it pops up close, right? So as part of our standard hazing package for new employees, we're gonna set up our deer here. We want to know how far do you have to be in before you can't see. You'll just see fur through the scope. So we'll see how far on each one he can go back, and we'll get the rangefinder. Now obviously this is a 2-power scope on the lowest end. Some of the others are 4-power on the lowest end. So this isn't so much a apples to apples fairs test, it's just practical if you're picking a scope for deer hunting, which one would work in that kind of scenario. Just so you'll have the information, I don't think we can really cut one out for this. You're doing great.
Thanks.
Huskamaw gets a score of 11.7 yards. 16 yards. Write all these numbers down. Wings out.
This wasn't in my job description.
Yeah, just go back further, dear.
Am I supposed to like prance or?
Yeah, that's great. We're gonna have to redo all the other scopes. I didn't know that was one of the options. You're doing great. So no surprise, Huskamaw 2-power did fine, but the surprising thing was, like, if you look at the Hawk and the primary arms, they're both 4-power scopes at the low end, and there's a 5-yard difference between the field of view there. However, I would say that 25 yards with the worst in this test for the width, you can still see a full deer at 25 yards. And so honestly, I don't think any of these I would cut out for being too magnified for hunting even at close range. I'll do the running around for this one. You can sit down on this one, dear. You're relieved of duty. Now we're doing the optical quality test. So we have a page out there about 35 yards away. It's actually the Declaration of Independence. We set everything to consistent magnification levels, and we're just seeing how easy it is to read the text on that page. I've always kind of discounted sharpness in scope testing because I think, like, I mean, I'm not taking a picture of it through my scope. I just need to see where on the deer I'm aiming and shoot. But I had an experience a couple weeks ago that really changed my mind on this, because I had a doe tag, and in this group of does, I could have easily made a huge mistake at distance at 400, 500 yards, whatever it was. I couldn't tell that one of them had tiny little antlers in there, and somebody on the spotter said, "Whoa, be careful, one's a buck." And in the scope, it just wasn't quite sharp enough to see that. So I'm really looking through these carefully now to see if any of them give us an edge on optical quality. And unfortunately, I just don't think in sharpness and chromatic aberration and sunlight getting in when we're looking toward the sun, I just don't see any real differences. Over the last 2 weeks, we've looked at a lot of other categories. We did a low light test and found them all to perform very comparably. They all did a great job. Couldn't declare a winner there. We looked at the weight, the total elevation adjustment, where every scope is made, and a lot more. So you can keep looking at that, but we want to get into a couple nitpicks on these scopes that maybe kick them out, and some X factors that have cool technology that brings some of these up. Now, some things bring scopes up. And now, for the riveting conclusion, after a couple weeks of work, there are 4 scopes that have risen to the top of this pile in all of these tests. Now, I can tell you that. I can show you all the specs and the results of all of these specific tests. What YouTube doesn't allow you to hear is any kind of brand recommendation, the best for hunting, best for the long-range shooter, target, that kind of stuff. And so for that, I made a simple page on the website. Go to backfire.tv/1000. That's backfire.tv/1000. Just type that in your browser. It'll take you right there, and I have a clear results there of what exactly I would pick after spending time on these. But there's really not a bad scope in this test. I want to give a shout out to all of the companies that chose to participate, sending scopes out and daring to put your product up next to others and being put through some brutal tests. I will say that some scopes and companies are conspicuously missing from this. I invited everybody to participate, and some of them didn't want to put their scope up next to others. Understandable, but that's why some are conspicuously missing, and others that we tried to stay in that 3 to 18 first focal plane range, but a couple second focal plane options and some that were close to that said, no, you've got to we've got to show this too. And so shout out to all the companies that chose to participate, and to the Backfire team, my wife Emily, Peyton, who was our deer here, helped with the testing, and also Ren for editing this. This was a huge undertaking, so hope you guys appreciate it. Thanks for checking out backfire.tv/1000 and this video. We'll see you in the next Backfire film.